Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I was on my knees, not out of defeat but in a moment where everything felt heavier than it should have. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of the clock ticking, yet my thoughts were louder than ever. He walked in, his footsteps steady, his presence filling the space like it always does. We had been arguing, small things piling up into something we never really talked about. I didn't expect him to come closer. I didn't expect the silence to break this way. When his hand reached for my hair, it wasn't rough, but it wasn't gentle either. It was somewhere in between, enough to make me pause, enough to make my breath catch. I looked up, unsure what he was thinking, unsure what this meant. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was something intense, something unspoken. For a second, everything stopped. The words I wanted to say got stuck, and the moment stretched longer than it should have. Was this his way of asking me to listen? Or was it his way of saying what words couldn't? My heart was racing, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. It felt like one of those turning points that decide where a relationship goes next, closer, or further apart. I wanted to break the silence, to ask why, but my voice didn't come out. His fingers lingered, his gaze searching mine like he was trying to find the right words too. This wasn't the first time we had reached a moment like this, but it felt different this time, more real, more raw. There was a storm in both of us, one we kept pretending wasn't there, and now it was just waiting to break. Before I could say anything, he leaned in just slightly, his hands still resting against my hair. "Are you ready to stop running from this?" he asked quietly, and for a second, I didn't know if he meant the argument, or something deeper. My lips parted, but the answer didn't come out. That's when everything paused. The air felt charged, and I realized, whatever was about to happen next, it would change everything. The room stayed quiet, but my heart was far from calm. His hand slowly slipped away, leaving a trace of warmth against my skin. I didn't move. I couldn't. There was something in his eyes that made me stay right there, searching for an answer I wasn't sure I wanted to find. We had been here before, not in this exact way, but in moments where silence said more than words ever could. Lately, our days had been full of small cracks, missed conversations, unanswered calls, the weight of everyday life building invisible walls between us. I thought about the past few weeks. The late nights, the way he had been distant, how I had chosen to keep quiet instead of asking why. It wasn't that we stopped caring, it was more like we stopped looking each other in the eye. Tonight, it all felt like it had come to a breaking point, though neither of us said that out loud. I remembered the way he used to smile when he came home, the little things that made us feel close. Those had become rare lately, replaced by short nods and unfinished talks over dinner. As I stayed there on the floor, I wondered if this was his way of trying to close the gap, or if this was the moment that would show me just how far apart we had drifted. His breathing was steady, but I could see his jaw tighten as though he was holding something back, words, frustration, maybe even regret. I wanted to ask him what had changed, what had made us feel like strangers in the same house. But the words wouldn't come out. He moved back slightly, sitting on the edge of the sofa, his eyes still fixed on me. "Do you even see me anymore?" he asked quietly. The question landed heavy between us. It wasn't about the argument we had earlier, it was about everything we had left unsaid for too long. My mind went back to the first time we fought seriously. I remembered how we promised never to let silence become our answer. Yet here we were, sitting in the very silence we once feared, both of us unsure how to break it without making things worse. I wanted to reach for his hand, to say something that could make sense of this moment, but my fingers curled into the carpet instead. There was a tension in the air that felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter whatever was left between us. His eyes softened just a little, but the distance between us still felt too wide. "I don't know when we stopped talking," I whispered finally, my voice almost breaking. He didn't reply, not yet. He just looked at me like he was waiting for something, maybe a confession, maybe a reason to stay. And in that moment, I realized we were both holding our breath, waiting for the next word that could either heal or break us completely. The silence between us felt louder than any argument we had ever had. I stayed on the floor, my knees aching now, but it was the weight of the moment that kept me from standing. His eyes hadn't left mine, and yet I couldn't read what was behind them. There were too many questions in the air, too many words we had avoided for too long. Every small misunderstanding from the past few months seemed to hover around us now, demanding answers we weren't ready to give. I thought of the nights he came home late, saying work had kept him longer. I believed him, or at least I told myself I did. But a part of me wondered if work was just an easier excuse for the distance that had slowly grown between us. And then there was me, retreating into routines, hiding behind the comfort of silence because I was afraid that asking too much would push him even further away. He finally leaned back, his hands clasped together, his gaze still heavy. "This isn't about tonight," he said, his voice low but steady. "It's about everything we've left unsaid." Those words felt like a mirror held up to everything I had been avoiding. There were so many layers to this moment, our unspoken frustrations, the nights we lay in the same bed but felt miles apart, the moments I caught him staring at nothing, lost in thought, and didn't dare to ask what was on his mind. I wondered if he had been waiting for me to reach out, to ask the questions I kept swallowing down. A memory flashed, how we used to talk about our dreams over late-night coffee, how he would pull me closer just to ask if I was really happy. Somewhere along the way, we stopped asking that. Maybe we were both afraid of the answer. The tension now wasn't anger, it was heavier than that. It was the fear of finding out we had both changed and never said it out loud. He opened his mouth to speak again, then stopped, his eyes searching mine like he was testing the strength of what was left between us. And in that fragile space, I realized the conflict wasn't about winning an argument. It was about finding out if we still knew how to fight for each other. His silence pressed harder than any words could have. I could feel the air tightening between us, heavy with all the things that were about to be said, or left unsaid forever. My hands trembled slightly against the carpet, and I finally rose to my feet, though it felt like my legs didn't fully want to hold me. His eyes followed me, sharp yet unreadable, like he was waiting for one more sign that I understood what had been breaking us apart. "I've been here," he said quietly, his voice carrying more weight than volume, "but it feels like we've been living in different rooms even when we're standing side by side." His words cut through the stillness like a blade, and I could feel my heartbeat rise. It wasn't about tonight's argument, it was everything that had been building, the late dinners, the empty conversations, the quiet nights where we turned our backs to each other, pretending the silence was enough. I wanted to shout that I missed him, that I hated how cold things had become, but the words tangled in my throat. My chest felt tight as his gaze locked onto mine again, searching for something he could hold on to. He stood now, his shadow stretching across the room, his presence suddenly closer, larger, and it made every breath feel heavier. There was a pause where neither of us moved, and I realized how fragile this moment had become. One wrong word could tear open every hidden scar between us, and one honest truth could change everything. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, as if they too were waiting to see what would happen next. His hand brushed past the side of my arm, not forcefully, not softly either, but enough to stop me from walking away. "Tell me when we stopped being us," he said, his voice rough but low. My throat burned with a reply I couldn't form. Every second stretched longer, every heartbeat louder. This wasn't just another night, this was the edge of something breaking or finally being seen for what it was. And just as I opened my mouth to speak, the clock ticked over, the sound sharp in the quiet room, like a reminder that time was still moving, even if we were standing still. The ticking clock echoed louder than it should have, like it was reminding us both that time was slipping away. I could see his jaw tighten as if he was holding something in, and that silence between us felt like a thread ready to snap. I stayed still, hoping he would speak first, but when he finally did, it wasn't what I expected. "There's something I haven't told you," he said quietly, his eyes dropping to the floor for a brief second before meeting mine again. My chest tightened. Those words had weight, and they didn't sound like the start of a simple confession. His voice carried that mix of hesitation and urgency that makes your heart race without knowing why. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to continue. But the pause stretched too long. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a slow breath and ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he always did when something was pressing hard on his mind. "It's not just about us being distant," he finally said. "There's been pressure from outside too, things I didn't want to involve you in." The words hit differently than I imagined. I had been ready for an argument about neglect, about the space between us, but this sounded bigger, heavier. "What kind of pressure?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. He looked toward the window as if expecting something to appear out of the dark night. "Work," he said, but the way he said it didn't sound simple. "They've been making decisions that affect us more than I've admitted. I thought I could handle it alone, but it's starting to follow me home." Suddenly, the late nights, the distracted eyes, the cold dinners, they all felt like pieces of something bigger. It wasn't just emotional distance, it was something creeping into our home like an unwelcome shadow. I felt a wave of unease crawl over me. "So, you've been hiding this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His eyes narrowed slightly, not out of anger but as if he was trying to read whether I was ready to hear the whole truth. "I didn't want to lose you while I was trying to protect you," he said. The room felt heavier now, the air thicker. Whatever he was carrying, it wasn't just guilt, it was a burden he had kept locked away, and now it was spilling into the one place I thought was safe. And just as I tried to process his words, his phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. He reached for it quickly, almost too quickly, his expression tightening as his thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, he didn't answer it. He just stared at the name, his lips pressed into a thin line. My stomach dropped. Whoever that was, it wasn't just a casual call. The phone kept vibrating on the table, its glow cutting through the dim light of the room. My eyes didn't leave his face, and his didn't leave the screen. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Finally, he picked it up, not to answer, but to silence it. The name faded from the screen, but the question stayed between us. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. He hesitated, then set the phone down slowly, his fingers lingering on it like it carried more than a message, it carried the truth. "It's someone from work," he said, his tone firm but not cold. "The pressure I told you about, it's more serious than I let on. They've been asking me to do things I'm not okay with. I thought I could keep it away from us, but it's been affecting everything." The weight of his words sank in, pulling together all the small pieces I had been trying to make sense of. The late nights, the silence, the way he would come home looking like he was somewhere else. It wasn't about us falling apart, it was about him trying to hold something bigger together. "I should have told you," he added, his voice quieter now, "but I didn't want you to get caught in it." I felt my shoulders loosen, the anger I had been holding on to fading into something else, something closer to understanding, even if it still hurt. We had been drifting not because we stopped caring, but because he was carrying a storm alone. Before I could answer, the phone lit up again. The same name. This time, he looked at me before picking it up. "I need to take this," he said, "but I want you to hear it." He answered on speaker. A sharp, worried voice came through, not a stranger's tone of intimacy, but urgency. It wasn't about betrayal, it was a warning. They were moving deadlines, forcing his hand, threatening his position if he didn't comply. As the call ended, he looked at me, a different kind of resolve in his eyes now. "I'm done hiding," he said. And just when I thought I understood everything, the doorbell rang, 3 slow knocks that didn't feel like a neighbor or a friend. We both turned, frozen, as the sound echoed through the house. The sound of the doorbell faded, leaving an echo in the quiet house. We both stood there, neither of us moving at first. His hand found mine briefly, a silent promise that whatever was on the other side, We would face it together this time. When he finally opened the door, it wasn't a threat, it was a courier with documents he had been waiting for. The tension in my chest eased, but the weight of what we had just gone through didn't vanish that easily. After the door closed, he set the papers aside and looked at me in a way that felt different, more open, more honest than it had been in weeks. "I don't want to keep anything from you anymore," he said, his voice steady but softer now. "I've been trying to fix everything on my own and only ended up breaking what mattered most." I sat down on the sofa, finally letting my breath come back in full. "You should have told me," I said quietly, "I would have stood by you." He nodded, moving closer, the distance that had felt like a wall now just a step away. "I know," he whispered, "and I think I forgot that we were supposed to fight these things together." The night stretched on, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel heavy. We talked, really talked, about his work, about the pressure he had been under, about the mistakes we both made by staying silent. The phone stayed on the table, screen dark, as if it had already done its damage but now served as a reminder to do better. By the time the clock struck midnight, the house felt calmer. The storm we had been carrying quietly for months had finally been let out into the open. It didn't fix everything right away, but it was a start, a promise to stop letting silence take over what words could still mend. That night, as we turned off the lights and the house grew quiet again, I realized something simple but powerful: distance doesn't always begin with a fight, it begins with the decision to stop trying. And tonight, we chose to start trying again.